guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're reviewing the Snyder Cut. So, this is a real interesting moment, and I think in a moment I'm going to start from the very beginning and kind of walk people through just even what the Snyder Cut is and why this is a thing, and try and explain it to some people, because I think to some people it's like they don't even get it. My girlfriend doesn't even get it, for example. I was trying to explain it to her. I was like, oh my god, it's just so complicated and weird. So we're going to walk through the whole thing. But before we even get to that, the first thought I had was just how weird it is to be here. If you look in the video description down below, I think the first line I wrote for it was, well, we never thought we'd be here, but today we're going to talk about the Snyder Cut. And that's how I feel as I'm starting the stream. Like, I never thought I'd be here, but today I'm going to talk about the Snyder Cut. And so, let's get into what that is. So, I assume at the bare minimum, most people are at least familiar with DC making a bunch of comic book movies and it kind of being an interconnected universe along the lines of what Marvel does. And the DC movies generally haven't done as well. Strictly from a financial perspective, excluding Wonder Woman 1984, which we'll just say is different. Because of the COVID pandemic and stuff, the stuff concerning everything. Tevia Smoka, thanks for joining us. Also, Grim John had a funny comment where he says his wife told him he was talking about the Snyder Cut in his sleep last night, which is pretty amusing. But, anyways, so the whole thing is, like, even if we're just going by the box office, the most profitable movie so far has been Man of Steel, and every movie since then has just had less and less returns from the box office. Man of Steel had a lot of issues, but more or less released as it was. Batman v Superman had way more issues, and essentially just got released as a mess. And I can't actually sit through the theatrical version. I find it unbearable because I've seen the extended director's cut of that movie, which was always kind of planned as part of its release and part of the agreement they had with releasing it. That is longer, R-rated, and just more of a full story with proper editing because they cut out the weirdest stuff from the theatrical version, but that's the version most people have seen. So then there's all this backlash, and Suicide Squad gets the first one, gets released basically with a director's cut also existing because they cut a bunch of stuff and there was all these issues behind the scenes, and it kind of shows in the final movie, and that culminated in the Justice League movie. Now, the Justice League movie was always supposed to be directed and like with the creative control in Zack Snyder's hands, the director of Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and a bunch of other movies such as 300, Watchmen, Sucker Punch, and other stuff less comic book related. So then what happened was first of all, and this part's important, because of all the backlash, Snyder was basically told by Warner Brothers to like put in more jokes and change around the script and all this stuff. And then they filmed the whole thing, as far as I can tell, until, tragically, Zack Snyder's daughter, and I'm blanking on her name, but she is dedicated to there is dedication to her at the very end of the movie, and it is touching. She took her own life. And so Snyder, very understandably, backed out of the Justice League project, and Joss Whedon, who we now know as an abuser, was brought in to take over the film and finish it, but really just do these extensive reshoots. And now that the director's cut, the Snyder Cut of Justice League is out, we know there was a lot of reshoots and significant changes to the Justice League movie, and the end result was honestly the worst thing out of all the DCEU I've seen so far, which is the theatrical edition of Justice League. Now, that theatrical version was pretty awful. It's basically two movies. It's got the Zack Snyder core movie with all the Joss Whedon stuff overlaid, including, most interestingly, all the sexist stuff. So, I don't know, Whedon is a terrible person, as we've now learned. But I don't know if all of this was him or Warner Brothers saying, "Oh, you got to put in more jokes, more jokes, more jokes," and so he added like and then he added like a romance angle between Wonder Woman and Batman that is barely at all present in the Snyder Cut for the movie's benefit, I think. And he added like the scene where the Flash lands on Wonder Woman's boobs, and it's like, oh, a boner joke. And so all this crap was added. They upped the color grading, so all the costumes looked terrible, and everything about Justice League kind of read as wrong. So that was all like 2 or 3 years ago now, if not more. And since that time, a fan campaign launched basically trying to get the Snyder Cut released. That campaign, we now learn, was infiltrated by like Russian hackers and alt-right culture warriors trying to sow division and basically turn the whole thing into this death threat machine, we'll say. And that almost discredited the whole push for the Snyder Cut, which, to be fair, all we here at Comic Island ever did in relation to that was light mockery, because I didn't really believe that the Snyder Cut would ever actually get released, so it was just fun to make fun of that, not so much the fans, just the Warner Brothers and the mess of the Justice League movie. And B, I didn't really believe it. So I just wanted to give a sense of the full story, but also to clarify, because even the way Warner Brothers presents this product, this isn't really Zack Snyder's vision. It's sort of the final compromise before he left the project. Because like I said, those rewrites are there because what kind of surprised me about the Justice League movie, the Zack Snyder version, is that I did like it. And I do think it's a vast improvement over the Justice League movie, but there are issues, and there's a lot of weird comedy moments, including some of the more awkward comedy bits from the theatrical version are, as it turns out, the Snyder stuff. And you can kind of see where he is putting in jokes in response to all the backlash to Batman v Superman, and he is making the story a lot more lighthearted than Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. And it is a response to that criticism in many ways. So I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And I definitely liked it a lot more than Justice League. And I think it even kind of competes with some of the lesser Avengers movies. It's easily better than Age of Ultron and even kind of the original Avengers movie. But the thing is, it's almost like comparing apples to oranges, because the original Avengers movie, like, as much as I don't have a lot of love for Joss Whedon anymore these days, I think that's a very nice, self-contained little movie. You can sit someone down and watch it with that person in a single sitting, and it's a complete experience. It's not exactly the deepest thing in the world, and it doesn't have any sort of character-heavy work, but it's an entertaining enough experience and a solid introduction to the Avengers. In comparison, Justice League is 4 hours long. So I watched this over the course of 2 days in like 2-hour blocks, basically. And while I enjoyed myself, I definitely kind of think it should be done in like, you need to kind of take a break in between, I feel, or something, because it's a long watch on its own. I would struggle to get through that in one viewing experience. I know people have. I understand that. I just couldn't possibly do that for like 4 hours myself. But because of that 4-hour length, every one of the Justice League members, like all 6 of them, really get a full story arc and a really full-throated character arc to them. And some amazing moments in all of that for all of them. Every single one of them gets to really shine at some point or another, and it's so cool. I look at something like the Wonder Woman scene early on in the movie, which is in the Justice League cut, but they're edited so differently, and it's such a stark reminder of how much difference A, reshoots can make, and B, editing makes. It was really a profound experience. There was all sorts of cool things to it, and I definitely would recommend it. So I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. And I definitely liked it quite a bit. I would say it's a great movie. It just has some problems with it. some people have called it like an auteur work of art, and I don't know if I go that far. Now, I've been kind of ignoring comments to get some of those thoughts out in a coherent sentence. Don't worry, we've got plenty more to talk about. I'm going to start engaging with chat a little more. So Henry Brown donates $5. Thanks, dude. You are so cool in how reliably you do super chats for us, and I really appreciate that. He says, Justice League movies are getting better over time, but it seems like DC needs to hire some Marvel writers or ghost writers. I think that's a solid point, too, because one of the bigger weaknesses in this movie is actually the writing. Some of the dialogue, it's a little, just a little, like, questionable, I would say, or just needed, like, a touch-up here and there. But at its core, like, it's got a really neat idea and plot. I kind of like how all the apocalypse stuff is sort of in the background but full-throated, while Steppenwolf is much more of a character who emotes and stuff. The movie looks better. People were saying some of the what am I trying to say? Some of the special effects are wonkier than others, and I definitely see that. But overall, I was impressed, especially for something like this, like a director's cut. Pretty much, it looks amazing. Tevye Smoka says, I thought this movie was really good. It's a major improvement over the theatrical cut. Yeah, and I definitely don't think... So, where I hedge it a little bit is like, I don't know, it didn't make me feel... It didn't feel quite as polished as Infinity War, even though I think it's better paced than something like Infinity War. So, that's where I get issues in comparing it with a standard comic book movie, is it's so much longer than any of those. And because of that, it can do different things... And I actually liked those different things. It does speak to how, in the world of HBOMax, Disney Plus, and all this stuff, there's really a lot of options for how these stories are told and produced. And I didn't hate this viewing experience, even though I took my time for it. The nice thing about streaming is I could have taken 5 days to watch it if I wanted to, and it didn't matter. I just started and paused, watched it on this TV at one point, watched it on my monitors. So I liked that. I don't know what else to say other than I'm cautiously optimistic about maybe there being future formats like this, or maybe Snyder even potentially returning to direct more movies or something like that, which is crazy for me to say, but he throws some really interesting ideas at the end of this movie out there. I think he tips his hand more than he normally would have if he thought he was ever coming back. But he did say he'd be willing to do it if Warner Bros. Would have him. And at this point, there's so many different opinions about the DCEU in general that I feel as though the ball's in Warner Bros.' court at this point. They can do what they want, really, because some people are going to want Snyder back, some people aren't. There's no popular opinion or consensus about this anymore. At least I don't think so. So they have a little bit more freedom to do this, I think. Or it's just going to be this endless barrage until they bring Snyder back. So, but that's not my problem. That's their problem. And they're going to have to figure that out. Tevye says, Justice League getting ruined by Warner Brothers really makes no sense to me. Joss Whedon taking over Justice League was a mistake. Yeah, Warner Brothers' habit of scooping up people like James Gunn or Joss Whedon to direct their direct equivalents. So Joss Whedon doing Avengers and then Justice League, James Gunn doing Guardians of the Galaxy and then Suicide Squad is a little bizarre to me. I don't think that's a good habit, and I think that's what led to so many of the issues behind Justice League is Whedon specifically. Also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but Cyborg is a huge flaring issue in all of this because he's so well done and interesting and really won me over in the Snyder Cut. And that part was hollowed out for the theatrical version. And as we've now learned kind of through Way Williams over the years, but just through other channels, but even just through the actual cuts of these movies, you can see it in action. People like Jeff Johns, higher ups at Warner Brothers, and Joss Whedon were really crappy to the actor playing Cyborg and totally unfair in how they treated him. So that's on them. I have lost so much respect for Jeff Johns over the last year or so as this news has gone out, and you can look up the details if you want. I'm not going to repeat it all here. and I don't have it all in front of me, but I think yeah, and that's actually what people were talking about there in the chat. Tevia says he didn't believe Snyder Cut was going to be released either. Grim John says, I'd say it's better than a lot of Marvel movies, just not better than the Russo movies. I don't disagree. Like I'm kind of with them there. I was just thinking about that for a second, and I kind of went, yeah, because the Russo movies are, I believe, Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame, and you had some heavy hitters there. But then, if you look at other Marvel, well, and I would also throw in maybe Guardians of the Galaxy, but again, very different kind of story. Hard to compare the two. But then you look at something like Captain Marvel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Spider-Man Far From Home, and it's like, oh yeah, well, Justice League is way more interesting than those movies. So it does exist. Youssef, I'm going to read your comment because I can see it, but I'm not going to flag it through because YouTube's weird about swearing. He says, it's the same movie, but no longer Marvel writers. And he said, okay, well, I think he's just responding to that comment from earlier, just saying, like, oh, he doesn't like the Marvel writers. He used different language there, and like I said, I don't care, but YouTube does. And I agree. Youssef says also, Chris Terrio is an Oscar-winning writer. The thing about that, though, is when I say writing, it really depends on how the director treats the writing, too. And I really do think Snyder tends to really harness scripts and make them his own, for better or worse. But Snyder is a feminist and has said as much. And I do like how he tends to write and work with female characters. You can see the vast improvement in Wonder Woman between movie A and B, and even the Amazons. So there's clearly a difference in how he looks at these things, and I don't actually disagree, but... So yeah, you can attach like these big writer names and it won't matter. I don't... Like I said, there's issues with the writing here, but it's not all bad either, and it's really comic booky, but I credit most of that to Zack Snyder, good and bad in the writing. So just to clarify a little bit there. Tevye says, Suicide Squad looks fun though. I honestly think we might just do a whole stream on that trailer. So yeah, but I do like that. Yusuf says, I like Harley Quinn when she's funny. I liked the Harley Quinn nod in this movie. That was great. I almost missed that line, and I was like, oh dang, that was good. No one's really brought up the last scene in this movie, and I'll just say for now, it was not what I expected for Joker's cameo. I thought it was bold, different, and interesting, and almost as people kind of suspected from Batman v Superman's director's cut, like going full injustice apparently, which is quite interesting. Grim John says, I know how you feel about Johns. I mean, it gets into how he's like some of the books he's written lately, like Doomsday Clock and Three Jokers, which I just found utterly disappointing. But also, just all this behavior we've learned about him behind the scenes is disastrous. It's just amazing how much a person can destroy themselves because, like, no one made him do this. But he like went out of his way to mock Greg Williams and steal bits from the Snyder Cut and put them in Doom Patrol. It's real shady stuff. You can't defend that. Tevye says, I did love seeing Darkseid in this movie, being the main villain, overarching, while Steppenwolf is merely like an exiled general who wants to come home, which is really interesting. Yeah, he is a character in this story. Not a super deep character, but Steppenwolf is something, and it is so much more satisfying when he's defeated. And by the way, when he is defeated, I don't know if I should give this away too much, but oh boy, does a character really get to shine. A couple of them do, I guess, but you know who I'm talking about. And it's kind of cool how, I'll give this away because it's on the poster, like Superman has that black suit and stuff for the whole movie. I liked that. I thought, I was like, wow, so it's more like when he came back in the comics or something and not just thrown away in a second. That was interesting. A lot of interesting decisions. And Tevye says that last scene with the Joker was really interesting. Perhaps we can just leave it at that. We'll see how long the stream goes and what other people want to talk about, but it might be a nice surprise if people haven't seen that for some reason and are still waiting. It is worth watching because so here's what I thought. I was like certain. I was waiting for it the whole movie. I was like, wow, the Joker still hasn't shown up yet. They go to Arkham and I'm like, okay, the Joker's going to show up now. And he doesn't. because I thought for sure, 100%, Joker was going to be locked up in Arkham and Batman was going to come visit him and be all tough. And then Joker's going to be like, you have no idea what's coming, blah, 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 the Legion of Doom hints, blah, 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 or whatever. It's a scene we've never necessarily seen before, but I'm sure we can all picture it in our head because it's like every other post-credit scene we've seen. But man, the Nightmare cameo, which I think we can call it, was something else and really blew my mind in how like deep it was in terms of like it had all these characters and clearly like had shown this history that had happened between the Justice League movie and this scene. It did a lot of stuff really clever. Tevye says, Doomsday Clock I liked, but man, I blame the higher-ups for ruining that story, and having Din Didio destroy that story is just sad. Well, that might be true, too. We don't really know what exactly happened behind the scenes, so I shouldn't fault Jeff Johns too much for that. But I really do think he's behind a lot of that stuff. And I also didn't enjoy Doomsday Clock. I understand some people did, and that's fine. I understand some people liked Three Jokers, and that's fine. I understand some people like the Justice League Theatrical Edition. And that's okay, I guess. Tevye says, Superman having the black suit made me so happy. It's cool, but it's also, what's really cool is how he returns and how that was handled and how well that was done. Tevye says, also Lex Luthor talking to Deathstroke is really interesting. So that's a cool scene because... I don't know how much we want to give away, because there's surprises upon surprises kind of thing, and but I do want to talk about that scene because that's pretty interesting because that's a good example of the differences between the theatrical and direct, like Snyder Cut. So because you have this post-credit scene with Luthor and Deathstroke in the theatrical version, and kind of the same scene for the Snyder Cut. But I thought it was just so interesting how the difference in just like, you know, the different lines and how much a scene can change ever so slightly just by like the coloring being different and the dialogue and just throwing in a little bit more. It became so fun. And it was just a nice, strong, like, it's just amazing how much it was improved between cuts, even though it was basically on a fundamental level the same scene, just with the added detail of, as Tevye was saying, of Luthor revealing Bruce Wayne as Batman, which gives that scene, I think that's probably the key difference, is they gave that scene weight and left people more excited, even though they're not necessarily going to follow up on all these plans, because that was kind of a hint apparently for the Batman solo movie, while the Joker cameo was more of a hint for the future of the Justice League movies. Tevye says, 3 Jokers I thought was so disappointing. Yeah, well, I just was talking about that earlier. Yusef says, Lois is the key. Why? And, you know, that's a very good question. I really liked the scene where they're talking about how Bruce Wayne got that message in Batman v Superman. And Diana's like, I think it's Diana's like, so I guess Lois was the key in getting this revived Superman to calm down. And Bruce says... And not in a grim, dark way, I feel quite appropriately, I think it's something darker. And as we kind of learn from the final scene, it does seem to play an important role in future events. And because Lois Lane does die, apparently it leads to this dark future. It might just be, I really think it's just that simple character thing of Lois Lane dies, so it has this effect on Superman and turns him into a nightmare. And that's why I was saying like it's going in the injustice direction. I don't think it's any more complicated than that, but it is darker in that sense, and even gets into some of the visions Cyborg had at one point in the movie. But man, what a cool character arc for Cyborg that wasn't present at all whatsoever in the theatrical edition. And that's where I get peeved at Whedon, Johns, and everyone else at Warner Brothers, because that sucks. They had so much cool stuff for Cyborg, and it was virtually all gone, including like a really moving death between him and his dad. That, even the way it was filmed, and the dude's skin bubbles for a second, he shudders, and then just turns to ash. That stuck with me. Grimjohn says, people can say what they want about Leto, but what the Joker had to say was some of the best Joker dialogue on screen. And then I saw a little farther down in chat, somewhere someone said, oh, where is it? Oh, here. Chris Kazam says Jared Leto was never as good as the Joker and never redeemable as the Joker. Now, actually, I personally disagree. I hated Jared Leto's whole thing in Suicide Squad. Didn't like it one bit. Didn't like his showy nonsense of like sending Margot Robbie a dead rat or something like that behind the scenes, which apparently he did. Didn't like his look or even the way he acted in Suicide Squad. He kind of won me over in the Snyder Cut. The way he performed it, the way that he, for some reason, didn't have his tattoos. Someone asked me about that. They were like, so did he get his tattoos removed? What was that? And I was like, I don't know, but I liked it. I don't have a good explanation for any of that, but I really liked his performance as the Joker in Justice League. However limited that was, that actually did leave me like, okay, that's a Joker I could follow in a series of DC movies. That's a Joker I actually feel kind of lives up to the character. It's no like Heath Ledger, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's not Joaquin Phoenix either, but I thought it was interesting, and like Grim John was saying, he had really interesting dialogue and a cool back and forth with Batman. And Zack Snyder was kind of right to want to film that and to give, because not knowing what the future's going to be, he was right to just be like, well, I'd like to give one chance for Jared Leto to act with Ben Affleck because we're probably not going to get that chance again. And I'm very grateful for all of that. Because that's the one thing that was apparently filmed for this entire Snyder Cut. And that's the only thing I could think about when watching this entire movie, because it just blew my mind and speaks to how much a movie can change over the course of reshoots. And, you know, to be fair, I do feel if you cut like half an hour out of this movie and put it in theaters, 3.5 hours long and all, I think that would have been a solid theatrical Justice League movie. I believe that because we're streaming and because it can be 4 hours, you might as well have left the half hour in. But if you were going to make people sit through this in theaters, if they just cut out like a half an hour, and I think there is room for that in this movie, in the Snyder Cut, without going full Joss Whedon, it would have been a perfectly serviceable like theatrical movie. As it stands, like I said, I like the 4 hour thing. I like how it is. That was fun and interesting. The Ninja Genko says, question, the Flash running ahead of creation, do you think that was an Easter egg? 100%, but also it was just cool as hell watching him run and the world being rebuilt around him as he traveled back in time. That was solid work in terms of what it did to like really, what am I trying to say? That was just good Flash movie stuff. I wasn't really sold on the whole lightning motion thing that happens around the Flash, but the way they did that and the way they set it up earlier with Superman's resurrection, where the Flash is running and the mother box goes out of the water back in time just so it can collide perfectly with the lightning, I thought that was brilliant and kind of beautiful, and then paid off so well as the final climax of the movie. Because so unlike in the Justice League theatrical one where all the heroes are starting to lose their, like, Batman's gun starts jamming, everyone starts faltering, and then Superman shows up, while that does kind of happen in the Snyder Cut, one could argue it's really the Flash who gets to save the day last minute. And that kind of feels appropriate given how like Justice League stuff tends to go. Chris Chasm saying his writing was too hard to notice for his terrible portrayal, referring to Jared Leto, and I was like, yeah, I get it, but I really thought he won me over and did kind of redeem himself in my eyes a bit for that final cut. Yusuf also mentions the anti-life equation, which is kind of revealed to be like ingrained in the Earth's surface. I thought that was interesting. It's a neat way for making Earth important in the grand cosmology of the universe for future stuff like Green Lantern or the new Gods movie, if either of those ever get made. I thought that was just a neat little nod, but also a huge impetus for Darkseid to return and the future of that. I do think it's almost comical that it's like, oh, we got this big threat, Darkseid, and then the Legion of Doom. It feels like Lex Luthor and Deathstroke don't fully compare to Darkseid, and it's weird to have them both kind of being introduced and built up in this movie. I just found that bemusing, but it didn't bother me or anything. Tevia says, Cyborg seeing that dark future was insane and really creepy. It was. Also, Darkseid going to Superman scared me. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and it pairs well with the ending of the movie, too, and stuff. The Ninja Genko says, the Crown of Thorns, it's a form of lobotomy. They should have went with that angle. Oh, yeah. They had some really interesting imagery and ideas in those flashbacks and forward and stuff like that. It almost threw me off in the very beginning when we started on Batman v Superman imagery, and I was like, "Oh God, we're back here again." But he had some really interesting ideas, some really weird choices for music. I will point that out. Some good, some bizarre, and took me out of the movie a little bit actually. And that's where I kind of get into like, yeah, it's a good movie, and I really liked the experience of watching it, but it wasn't perfect. Tevia says, Flash getting to save the day made me so happy and proved to me we were robbed from the very beginning. You're right, because the thing about stuff like that is like so much of that had to have been filmed beforehand, even if they had to do a lot of that post production stuff to make the Snyder Cut, and I think that's where the effects kind of are a little flimsy here and there, but it looks so good. However, a thing I found so strange, and I still don't understand, is why the whole thing was in 4:3 ratios. It was a big square instead of the usual widescreen. Now, they said at the beginning of the movie that that's to preserve Zack Snyder's original vision, but I don't fully understand that, because theoretically, Snyder would have filmed in widescreen. This YouTube video is filmed in widescreen. So the technology is just so ubiquitous now that doesn't make sense to me. However, I feel as though that's like a weird quirk of the director's cut and of restoring all this production and figuring out a way to do it. That might have been a compromise along the lines for some weird reason where it's like, oh, there's some really weird stuff we can't get rid of in the corner of the scene, so let's just make the whole thing 4:3. I think. I don't actually know. I found that... Oh, Tevye says he thinks it was probably because of IMAX. Okay, thank you. I was very confused. That actually does make sense, but I was baffled by that choice. Kirk Kazam says, yeah, this movie could have been 2 hours and 45 minutes. I disagree. Too many drawn-out sequences with slow-mo, and I lost you in chat because it's moving fast. But I do think that... what were you saying exactly? I lost it. Oh yeah, the slow-mo. I don't think there was that much slow-mo though, and what I really liked was the fast motion stuff he did with like Wonder Woman, and she's like bam, 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 like moving her hands really fast and blocking a million bullets. That was so cool. I liked that, and I get what he's saying there, and there is a lot of bloat to this movie. It's incredibly self-indulgent. However, what I liked about that and what I was saying earlier is the cool side of that is you get like a really full-throated build-up in this movie, for one thing. Like, it takes forever for Superman to show up. And there's also, like I said, a full character arc, including for Superman. Because even though he takes forever to show up, Ma Kent and Lois Lane are a big part of this story. And Lois is the key. And stuff. I actually liked the weird, borderline experimental experience of watching this 4-hour thing, and just everything under the sun is in this movie. Now, where I agree with Kirk Kazam is it never had to be this long if Warner Brothers had a brain in their skull and put out a Aquaman movie, a Cyborg movie, and a Flash movie, and a Batman movie before they put out a Justice League movie. That blows my mind. Maybe you can use Justice League to introduce one of those characters. Like Cyborg would make a lot of sense because he's a pretty integral part of the story, so you can tell his origins at the same time and tie it all together. But we should have had some of these characters introduced, and if Warner Brothers had a brain in their skull. Now that's not Zack Snyder's fault, but I think where a lot of these weaknesses exist in this movie also isn't Zack Snyder's fault. SNS Product says the music choices were horrible, and I've seen that a couple times in chat, so I'm glad I'm not alone in that thought. Yeah, like I said, it took me out of the movie. I found some of them insane. They weren't what I expected, which was like a bunch of Zack Snyder's usual choices of weird covers. They were like house metal music, which actually was sometimes okay, but other stuff was like weird poppy songs surrounding like pretty dark action scenes. I didn't understand some of that. Kirk Kazam says Wonder Woman's action scene anthem, the dun 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 dun, or whatever, sounds so bad. It sounds like Psy Kids. I don't know why they can't just stick to some quasi geek style music, more choirs and whatnot. Personally, I love that Wonder Woman theme, and that's actually one of the music motifs in this movie I liked and kind of worked for me more than some of the other stuff personally. But I am kind of with you guys in general that it's just some of the music choices are baffling, and I'd have to kind of go back through it to like really have more specific references in mind, because it's just all over the place and it's hard they're so disconnected from the scenes that I'd have to like match them and write it down or something. I didn't really take any notes for this movie. I thought I had so many thoughts and feelings as a result from it that I would have no shortage of things to talk about, which has very much been true. Yeah, okay, so people are confirming that was in IMAX and they didn't want to cut and compromise any of the frame. That I actually, okay, that's a good reason. Like I said, I thought it was probably some weird technical reason. They should have just said that at the beginning, because I just thought it was really strange. But okay, this movie would be cool to see in IMAX, to be honest. Some of the stuff we see and some of the scenes and all that. But then you have to sit for 4 hours, right? So it would need like an intermission. Hank Moody says, "Hey, is there a black and white version of the movie on HBOMax?" There is not, which kind of makes that marketing poster pretty weird, right? I don't think the movie was made to be seen in black and white, though, because its use of color is very specific, and I would argue pretty well used in the Snyder Cut. And I wouldn't really recommend it. You kind of want that color, because a lot of the colors are muted kind of throughout the movie, and then when they do come out, they come out really strong. So it's kind of cool like that. I like it. Visually, I think this movie is great. I don't really have much problem with the cinematography. Everything, like the costumes look a million times better because that's the color scheme they were made to be filmed in. And the Justice League vehicle is better set up and paid off, which I thought was funny. All that stuff just works and looks better because of the way it's filmed. And that's kind of because that was the way it was meant to be filmed. Maybe I should clarify. The scene where like Superman comes back is so much better looking, even though again, like it's fundamentally the same thing. It gets into that Deathstroke Lex Luthor scene I was talking about, where even just changing how a scene looks, just 100 times better all of a sudden. Tevias says, "I am hoping we do get a sequel to the Snyder Cut, but sadly, I don't see that happening, which is sad because this movie was really good and deserves a sequel. However, knowing WB, I don't see that happening." You know, I'm not gonna... You can't say never anymore, because honestly, I think it's perfectly possible at this point. Like I said, the ball's in Warner Brothers' court. Wouldn't necessarily fault them if that's not what they decide to do, but if it were me, I'd be like, well, that end scene of Justice League was really awesome and sets up some cool future things. Everyone's hyped about this, and it will probably, from a business perspective, make sense at this point. Why not just do it and actually let Zack Snyder just do his thing instead of us constantly interfering? Grim John says you have to have hope, Tevia, and I'm going to echo that statement. I think you do need to have hope. Crix Zam says, "Oh, I like this fast stuff with Wonder Woman. I made the think, or Monster Tikal, I think, is saying, made the mistake of thinking that was bad special effects in his review. That's just her superpowers." Oh, yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's not bad special effects. That's her powers in action. It shows Wonder Woman's speed is like not Flash level or Superman level, but she has super speed and stuff. And I thought it just showcases all of her powers so much better than the Justice League movie. When I saw that scene where she's doing the arms things and saving the people, I stopped the movie and started it from the beginning and made my girlfriend start to watch for me, because I was like, this is really interesting. And then she didn't take as much of an interest, so I kind of let her be, and we didn't watch the whole thing together. But that scene where she's doing that cool action stuff really had me excited for this, and I thought was just such a cool example of how different a cut can be between two different movies, and how much like special effects and editing can make an action scene 1,000 times better and more interesting. That's interesting though that someone mistook that for bad special effects. I thought it looked amazing. uh, Tevia says, I loved Desaad's voice and Darkseid's voice in this movie. It was awesome. I found Desaad's voice pretty generic and not really what I pictured for that character. Darkseid was good. I'm with you there. That sounded great, and that was a cool setup at the end with him. And it's kind of neat that there's all that stuff on Apocalypse at the end that's like setting up stuff in the future. I totally expected that, and then there's so much more after that in such an interesting way, and that was a real pleasant surprise. I was hoping as much, but it really, a lesser movie would have just ended on Darkseid, like the Avengers did, pretty much with Thanos. Okay, chat's going by quick, so I'm just going to read this next question I see here that I think is really interesting because I haven't talked about it yet. Jack Titmas says, how do you feel about the use of chapters? I think that was a solid idea. If you're going to have something super long that's 4 hours, that, like I said, in my opinion, kind of asks for a break at some point, those sections and chapters are a good way for people to be like, all right, I'm going to pause here. That's actually what I did in between the 2 days, is I hit the end of one part or something like that, and it was exactly 2 hours long, so you can figure out what part that was. And I was like, okay, I'm good here. Roughly 2 hours long, and I was ready to take a break, kind of thing. I think that was solid, and it's also it's good pacing. Because you have these little headers and stuff that get people excited because it's like something darker or something like that, and it gets people excited potentially for the next one, or like kind of cues up something significant happening in the next part. Why not? It was good. It was very effective for something this long. Let's put it that way. SNS Products says, this is by far the most fair review of the Snyder Cut. It is? Oh no. I went out of my way not to watch any other reviews. I haven't seen like Screen Rant's pitch meeting for it. I haven't seen Red Letter Media, and you guys know how much I love them. I was like, I watched the movie, and then this was the first day that was really good for me to stream this stuff, and I was like, all right, like, here we go. We're gonna do this. That's interesting. So reviewers aren't a fan. Like I said, there's plenty of problems, and I've had plenty of criticisms along the way, but I definitely didn't hate it. And to be honest, that second viewing, I was actually pretty tired. I hadn't slept in a while, and thought I'd put it on for a little bit before I went to bed. And right around the third act, when everything starts to pick up in Chernobyl, the movie pulls me right in, and I watched the whole damn thing. I really got pulled in that last act, and for a movie like this to have a strong ending, which I feel it did, I thought it was pretty solid. I stopped dead in what I was saying because I read in chat Jamieson Horden says Red Letter Media actually thought it was pretty good, which is surprising, and that was so surprising it threw me for a loop. Okay, well, because I think about their criticisms of the original Justice League, and a lot of stuff is improved from that. So I would, if they're being honest and approached it with an open mind, then yeah, they would probably like it quite a bit. I could see them liking it less than I did, and I think that's fair, just because I know how they are about like big bloated action scenes. But I thought that Chernobyl stuff was great, and I see people in chat kind of echoing that sentiment, which is cool. Youssef also mentions how Wonder Woman gets to basically finish off Steppenwolf by chopping his head off. Loved it. I loved that so much because that last little action scene, Cyborg has this incredible and kind of earned moment where he separates the mother boxes. Superman gets to like pummel the crap out of Steppenwolf. Aquaman kind of gets to make a pretty heavy blow with the trident. Everyone kind of gets their own little moment here to do something significant. Some a little more polished than others, and then it all kind of comes together with the Flash. And I guess Batman does something in some way. They all have something to do, is my point. Batman brought the whole team together anyways. Jamieson says, Steppenwolf's molten metal communication scene was a creative idea, I thought. That's interesting. I didn't love that. I thought that part was just kind of very digital effectsy and not that interesting. But you're kind of right in the sense of that's better than a hologram, though, and I definitely like it more than that. And it is very alien, so I think even your just like relatively innocuous comment kind of had me thinking like, oh, you're kind of right there. Like I see what you're saying. um, the Ninja Genko says Ben Hur has good pacing, and there are those older movies that are like that. But a lot of those movies kind of have intermissions or clear breaks. Like I'm thinking of Titanic, which is also very long. But when we got Titanic for home release, like my family, it was in 2 VHS packs because it was 2 tapes. So there was a nice clear break between the two. You could, go to the bathroom. Everyone goes and gets a drink or a snack or whatever. There's this room for intermission. I think Sound of Music and a lot of the other older movies were like that. And you know what? It would be kind of cool if the next time they make something like this, they just put it out in theaters like that with a real intermission where like the lights go up and you can actually go to the concession stands and they'll let you know when to kind of take a seat, like a theater or something. Movie theaters might not be as big a fan of that, but maybe if they charge a little more or something to justify that, maybe, make it a little more of an experience somehow. It's doable. I don't know. I'm not a businessman. I don't know why we're talking about that. Kirk Kazam says Chernobyl scenes were based, but I really liked it. It made me appreciate why it was taking place in Chernobyl. They kind of set it up right at the beginning where like Steppenwolf finds it and he's like, oh, this place is full of radiation. This is perfect. And it paid off really nicely. It's just this nice big empty city for them to fight in. What I don't love about it is that such a clear response to people not liking the mass scenes of destruction in Man of Steel. And what I don't get is why Zack Snyder can't come up with something else for these superheroes to do at the end if that doesn't have to involve whole cities being decimated if it's such an issue, or he can't write his way around it somehow. Because it feels like we keep finding these plot conveniences now. It happened again, and like that happened before in Batman v Superman, and now it's happening here. And my challenge to him and any other comic book movie filmmaker, I guess, would be to find something more creative to do or different with regards to how you end a superhero movie like this. Tevia says, heck, the Justice League all saying they need to bring back Superman made me so happy, especially with the Man of Steel music. True. The only thing about that, and it does set that up way better than the theatrical edition. Like, they're kind of like, okay, this Mother Box thing is an agent of change. It doesn't really have this morality to it. It just wants to change things. So if we tell it to change a dead superhero, it should make him alive. That was set up pretty well. It is weird how they're all like, oh, we should just bring Superman back from the dead. Like, they kind of thought of that awfully quickly. And I still don't really understand why Snyder thought it was necessary to kill off Superman that early. Well, that's my statement right there. I don't really understand all of that. But, Nilson Mercado is, and I think someone else was having fun hyping up Snyder in chat. But yeah, we've talked about release the Snyder. What was it? I don't have the new hashtag in my brain yet, but someone has said it already. Release the Snyderverse. I'm not totally against it, like we were talking about before. Tevia says, Cyborg saying I am not broken and Superman helping him separate the mother boxes was awesome. Yeah, that was so cool. Because, so there's two things about that. I really like the little bit of character work they incorporated into the mother box thing, but I also think it's pretty critical that Superman helped separate the mother boxes, because they talk about how these things have destroyed hundreds of thousands of worlds. So it's a little silly to me that Cyborg would just be able to do it on his own, but it is established that Superman is like unusually strong, even by cosmic standards, which is true of the comics and stuff. So the two of them were able to push the mother boxes apart no problem, and apparently destroy them in the process, which I thought worked. That was pretty great. The Ninja Genko says they're called epics, referring to these longer movies. it kind of works for something like Justice League, to be honest. Like this big epic thing that kind of comes around once in a while, and maybe they can cut some sort of deal with the theaters to make it happen or something. I would really be interested in exploring these other ideas. Or maybe there's a world where like HBOMax facilitates this sort of thing somehow. I don't know if that's possible, but it'd be cool if it is. Darkseid says, which is funny, I like the, like, that's literally his username. So I guess Darkseid's joined us in chat. Oh boy. He says, I like the remake Steppenwolf. Oh, it's definitely a million times improvement. Even if he's still kind of a flat character, at least there's a character there, and I can tell you something about Steppenwolf, which I couldn't just based on the theatrical movie before. The Shadowcatcher says they should just sell all the DC rights to Marvel Studios already. No. Absolutely not. I know he's joking, and Shadowcatcher, thanks for joining us. You were saying made it earlier, and that's great. Absolutely not. If the last thing we need is more of a monopoly on superhero movies or content, that is the worst case scenario. Because, yeah, Marvel's doing a better job, but because Marvel does a better job sometimes it pushes DC to do better. And if DC does something like the Snyder Cut, it pushes Marvel to do more and better stuff too. So absolutely we need to keep these two companies different. And I don't ever, as much as I've criticized rightfully Warner Brothers for doing stuff before, what I would like for them to do is improve, not for them to lose or for them to lose control of these movies or anything like that. I would like for them to learn from their mistakes, and I don't think that's too much to ask. And not in some overcompensation, which in a lot of ways Justice League does feel like a bit of an overcompensation in its humor in Chernobyl, which I like Chernobyl, but like I said, it's just the way these stories are built now is all just in response to these criticisms from before, which is a terrible way to tell your stories. Yusef says, anti-life equation Superman. Oh, that's an interesting idea if that's related to what we see at the end of the Justice League movie, and that has a negative effect on Superman. That, to me, would be more interesting than it just being a reaction to Lois dying. Let's put it that way. Tevia says, technically there are no civilians in the Chernobyl city, unlike the Whedon cut, which had civilians. Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. They're going out of their way to take... Like, so in Batman v Superman, they had a thing where they're like, there's no civilians, where everyone's gonna have this big blowy up fight now, so no one's dying, so it's okay, which felt really forced in. And then having the Chernobyl thing, what am I trying to say, is another way to kind of just keep civilians out of it. That being said, it was real nice not to have that family that randomly showed up in the theatrical Justice League movie in the Snyder Cut at all. They were gone, and that was great because that was completely unnecessary, and it was great. Darkseid says Darkseid should be the main villain if they make Justice League 2. Of course you'd say that, but I actually kind of depends on what the plan is. The way I kind of see things is maybe like Justice League 2 is Darkseid and Justice League 3 is like the Nightmare stuff. But I actually kind of think the next Justice League movie is dealing with all of this stuff at once. Flash going back in time and trying to change the events of the Nightmare history we kind of see at the end of the Justice League movie. We're going to, I guess, get more into spoilers from here on out. But, yeah. And then Nelson says, second movie in Justice or Nightmare. I agree. I think we're going full-fledged into that direction. If we've learned anything from the DCEU, it's they do not like the slow build-up. So they will not be going in that direction. Tevia says... Oh, actually, let's do this next. Henry Brown says, off topic, because he donates another $5. Thank you. Did you see the 2021 Suicide Squad trailer? I enjoyed it, but I kind of wish they kept the original cast and maybe had a better story. Well, thank you for your donation. I am very optimistic because of the nature of James Gunn, and I do want to answer your question a bit, but I do also potentially just want to do a whole stream for that Snyder, or for the, because now I am getting confused, for the Suicide Squad trailer. And then Henry Brown donates another $2 saying, Snyder's Cut trailer Suicide Squad. You know what? That's fun. I'll see what I can do for you in that regard. See if I can turn that into something. Let's put it that way. Because that sounds really funny, and I think I can make something fun out of that with a little bit of editing. How does that sound, sir? As in gratitude for your repeated donations. Hopefully you like it. Chris Kazam says, okay, hopefully I'm not losing connection. But Chris Kazam says, honestly, I think one day there will be a merger of Warner, DC, and Disney Marvel. And then he says, LOL, the superhero genre will change over the coming decades as the society changes, and I don't see why it won't happen. I get what you're saying, as like corporations in America become increasingly monopolistic, and it is a valid concern, but it's just, to me, less competition. Like, everyone's always on me about being a lefty and stuff in this stuff, but in these videos, but it's just so anti-capitalist to me. And I am a big believer in competition, especially when it comes to like superhero stories and stuff. So I would argue there should be more comic book companies, not less. And I'm very interested in what that new Invincible TV series looks like, for example, speaking of. Jameson says, with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the Snyder Cut getting released in the same month, the ultimate winner is the audience for the superhero genre. Nailed it. That is an excellent point. And yeah, he's right. We win when they feel the competition and they feel the need to release stuff at the same time. I think the winner, if we're going to compare the two, is the Snyder Cut, if we look at the hype and discussion around it. But Falcon and the Winter Soldier gets the benefit of the fact that it keeps going. And it will, I think, get its time in the sun as well. Tevia says, which I was happy that the Russian family aren't in this version because they felt forced. 100% yes. They were so forced and so unnecessary, and they were just Joss Whedon jamming more humor in. And already the Justice League Snyder Cut is pretty funny to begin with, so it was completely unnecessary. Nelson also says Black Adam soon, Zack Snyder in on it, and Snyder has also been producer in a lot of these other DCEU movies, and I'm a lot more optimistic, and I'm starting to think increasingly that Snyder might actually be able to produce something of value for these comic book movies, and a lot of the problems of the DCEU stuff stem more from Warner Brothers. Although he does have weird instincts for superhero things. And so, I think Snyder did a good job with Justice League, for example. I maintain he was always a bad director for Superman, though. He got it right in this, but Superman doesn't have a ton to do in this movie, and it's kind of just built around that instead, and that worked better. Jack Titmas says, in response to some of the stuff from earlier, God no, Marvel needs DC as much as DC needs Marvel. The Western genre was the exact same 30 years ago, and when a single studio took control over it, it straight up died. Yeah, that's a good point. Competition leads to stagnation, or just the whole thing coming to an end. Because what happens if this is all in one company is sooner or later Marvel's gonna stop doing as good a job as they keep consistently doing. And their movies are going to come worse, and hopefully the DC movies will be getting better at the same time, and then Marvel will feel the need to catch up. If that doesn't happen, then one of them's going to bomb, and then they're going to want to stop making movies for 5 or 6 years until someone else wants to try it again. And then we lose. And that gets into what Jameson was saying before. We lose the less there's competition in the world. Although it's more complicated when it's you have characters such as the X-Men or Spider-Man who are pre-built into the Marvel universe, and it feels weird when they're off in their own into the Fox world. I'm less against that, even though Disney obtaining all of the Fox properties was problematic in its own right. Because now they control Alien, and those comics are a disaster at the moment under Marvel. It's a whole thing. And so, I have no love for Disney. Or Warner Brothers. I recognize what they are, but I do think, we need that competition. Darkseid says, I like the final battle scene far better than the one in the original film. No kidding. It's such a difference. And that's where I think the differences are most felt, because that's where I really took interest for the Snyder Cut. And that's where it's the most frustrating and boring in the Justice League theatrical version, and that's nuts. Chris Kazam says, I'm left-leaning as well, but I'm coming from the fact that there will be new, ambitious, heavy hitters in the superhero genre that will be a competing threat to DC and Marvel. Okay, I kind of thought that's what you might have meant, and that's why I kind of brought up Invincible, and I do think that is possible too, and I do actually hope there are more companies competing than just Marvel and DC, in which case that becomes less of a loss too if it does all go under one umbrella, because as long as there's other competition out there. If Todd McFarlane has his way, then Spawn is like a whole other level of competition, for example, and that'd be cool as hell. Tevia says, corporations really need to stop screwing over these because it isn't fun but depressing. Yeah, and like they can't just keep doing these director's cuts. How many times has this happened now? So we have Suicide Squad, the first, Batman v Superman, and Justice League. So 3 movies that are significantly diminished because of studio edits, as far as everyone else can tell. What a disaster. Those are their big blockbusters. So then when we have the DCEU, which keeps making less money at the box office each time a new movie comes out, this is why. Hopefully the Snyder Cut can reverse that course, and maybe Black Adam will actually come out in theaters or something and make them some money, but they also seem pretty engaged in just putting stuff out on HBOMax with everything else, which is shocking, and we'll see how all that goes. Tevia's... Oh, we already did that one. Tevia says, true, Warner Brothers doesn't really have a plan whatsoever in reference to other stuff. Yeah, there's no plan there, but that also leads to more experimentation, too. Like a standalone Batman and Joker movie, and the Joker movie was pretty cool, and the Batman movie looks really cool, so... Not having a plan hasn't been the worst thing either. Grim John says, totally loves Man of Steel. Oh, we don't need to get into all of that now. I personally did not. Let's embrace our shared love for the Snyder Cut. Chris Kazam says, Westerns do not have the same lasting power and adaptability as superheroes. Kind of agree. There's only so much you can do, and they're a little more boxed into their genre, whereas superhero stories can be pretty much any genre. You can have a whole series of superhero stories based on Westerns. Not just obvious stuff like Jonah Hex or 1872, but just something like Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine, where they go back in time to a Western. Or just telling a story like a Western. Like Spawn's flirted with that and stuff. But I agree. And then Kurz Kazam goes on saying, honestly, it seems like Westerns are barely surviving in sci-fi with space cowboy stuff. Yeah, well, I think that's the issue, though, is that because you're just like, it is one genre and it is sort of more predictable. Like, I think there will always be a presence of it, but it'll be more like situational, such as when like Tarantino comes along and does something, or someone puts together a really cool one. That being said, there are some cool Westerns there, like more recently, such as Bone Tomahawk and stuff. Not sure what your opinion is on that particular film. Yusuf says, DC has better fan service than Marvel. That's an interesting thought. Better fan service is specifically what he says. I would almost argue so, because, or at least in the version that we saw of the Snyder Cut, because the Snyder Cut does stuff where it's like, if you're a DC comic book fan, you'll know what this means. Whereas Marvel is more like winking at the audience, like, it's that thing. We're calling her the Scarlet Witch now. Did you get it? It's more in your face with it almost. And I almost kind of agree with Yusef's broad statement there, or at least I think what he was getting at there. Because if you look at something like Shazam, that's way more Marvel-style fan service. Darkseid says, I guess Warner Brothers needs a break of making films. No, I don't think so. I think they have some interesting ideas, and I think they're on the right track. I'm looking at stuff like the Batman trailer and James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, and I'm cautiously optimistic. Yusuf says Marvel doesn't even need to try because of Disney. True, but you look at something compared to like how Marvel makes their movies these days compared to like Lucasfilms, and I feel as though one production company is flourishing far more under Disney than the other. But I think that really just comes down to Kevin Feige more than anything else. And I was thinking that as I was watching the Snyder Cut of Justice League, is that DCEU really needs someone like Kevin Feige, who's like not so much a director but a producer, who really likes comics and understands them. And I don't think Snyder is necessarily that person. I know I was kind of saying that before, but when I compare him directly to 5G, I don't really think he's the right guy for that. He's a director. He should direct some of these movies, but I think you need someone kind of above it all. And they were setting up Jeff Johns to do it, which proved to be a disaster. So they got to find someone more, I think, from the business side of things who just likes reading comic books. Because that's, I think, what Kevin Feige pretty much is, and that's so much better. Although I'm not entirely sure if that's his background. Somebody's told me his background before, and I forget. Tevia says, Invincible animated series right now is fantastic. Well, that's what I was getting at when I was saying, yeah, like T and so can Spawn. There are a lot of avenues for that to actually happen, and some real traction for these franchises these days. Jameson says, the superhero genre will survive as long as writers and directors continue to get creative. As soon as it gets stale, the genre will go on hiatus. Well, that's what I was saying. That's why I feel the more companies out there to find successes and stuff, the less likely that is to happen. Because from our perspective as comic book fans, we don't want that to happen. Unless they all get really stale, and then maybe a break is warranted. Tevia says, I really don't want Disney to keep buying everything because that would mean we are going to lose competition, and that's just sad and depressing. I think it's worse than that. The more power Disney has in that regard, the more they can bully theaters, the more they can do terrible corporate businessy things and just tighten their grip on the film industry and beyond. None of that is good. I don't think that Fox deal should have ever been approved. I think the only thing that Disney should have been allowed to do was get the X-Men and characters and any other characters that they already owned back. That should have been allowed. But everything else, they have no business owning the Alien or Predator franchise, and that worries the crap out of me. Curse Kazam does point out, and I think this is a good point, that superhero comics have gone through several hiatuses and periods of staleness and recovered from them. Yeah, they've never quite gone on full hiatus, but he's right in that they have contracted and expanded and been through periods where the comics get really stale, and then you have this new group of people come in and really bring some energy to it, and that is a cycle. And I assume a similar cycle will exist for both Marvel and DC, even if they just keep making superhero movies from here on out. And that's always something to remember. Just because DC's movies kind of struggle relative to Marvel's, which feel just so polished and ready to go each time, because there's never been a MCU director's cut because it's never really felt needed. But one day that's going to change. It always does. These things kind of come and go in cycles, and that's how it works in the comics too. One year, Marvel will be making better comics than DC, and the next year it'll flip right back over. Tevia says, Valiant could have been great with Bloodshot, but it bombed thanks to Sony once again screwing up. Yeah, they sure did. I forgot that happened. That happened pretty early on in the pandemic, and it really bombed. And apparently, I haven't seen that movie to be fair, but apparently it's real bad. Curse Kazam says, I hated Fox's X-Men's boring, realistic costume designs. Yeah, and that's where I get into, it is complicated because we're talking about all this competition stuff, because I'm actually very excited for, and think it's for the best, that, Disney has both the Fantastic Four and the X-Men back. That felt very necessary. Jameson says, the 1990s were a tough decade for comic book film adaptations, to bring up an example. Yes. But there's other decades too for that. Before it's even worse basically. Jack's Titmas says, how do you feel about the bombardment of announcements, trailers by Warner Media after the release of the Justice League movie to distract from the film itself? Well, that's an interesting interpretation. I interpreted it as not so much a distraction as them being oh, people are paying attention to us in a positive way. News! I really don't think it's intended to be a negative. I think they're trying to capitalize on it and build up on it. I would be shocked if that was intended as a negative thing. They are done fucking around with Zack Snyder at this point, I believe. Rishaba Mukherjee says, did you see the Snyderverse having a romance between Wonder Woman and Batman? If he's going in that direction, he is taking his time. He had the smallest little bits of hints of that. And you know what? I'm not really against it. It's better than her constantly pining after Chris Pine. Pun intended, I guess. She even references him in the Snyder Cut. I don't know if she did in the theatrical version, but I'm just let go of it. It's been so long. Like, from her perspective, it has been so many decades at that point that it is nuts she even thinks about Steve Trevor anymore. um, Tevye says, Snyder is more of a director who wants to tell a story, which I'm fine with. And then, because a couple other people in chat have said that. Uh-oh. Okay, my mic's apparently cutting out a lot. I'm just gonna. Is that better? Anyways, hopefully that's better. But thank you guys for letting me know. Yeah, I think that like, and a couple other people in chat have been saying it too. Like, I was saying, Zack Snyder, I don't think is the person to helm all of the DCEU, and is more to be a director of these movies, some of these movies. I really, yeah, don't think he's a good fit. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Tevye says, I agree they should have been allowed to buy back Fantastic Four and X-Men way more than Fox as a whole. Yeah, we're just getting a choir now, huh? Nick says, Snyder has never read and understood a comic, period. Oh, I disagree. Especially after watching this movie. That's not how I feel at all, personally. And if anything, I feel as though Snyder is consistently inspired by comic books. If you look at how he films movies, or even ones not really based on a comic book, like Sucker Punch, he really has a sense of storytelling kind of drawn from comic books. And like, his first big movie was 300, which is just like the most faithful comic book adaptation there might ever have been. Tevi also points out nobody's perfect, and the MCU has made mistakes as well. Yes, and the first few MCU movies were pretty rough too, and it took them a while to get going as well. So, it's not the end of the world for the DC universe, and I think they can turn it around. And I say turn it around because they were struggling at the box office. I also don't know if they care anymore, or if they're just investing that heavily in HBO Max. In which case, they might not, as long as these things are getting good numbers for them. But that's where I was saying, like, yeah, the news and the announcements following the success of the Justice League. Oh, Boxing Jedi's like, sorry for the caps, I have bad eyes. Guys, not yelling. Well, that's cool, man. That way you can check your own chat. Yeah, I do think there's a lot of hope for them, especially if they're just like producing these things for digital purposes. But that's where I was saying, like, yeah, they're the only ones who really see the numbers of the Snyder Cut. And to me, oh, my mic's still cut. Oh, okay. There's now debate about whether or not I'm sounding good in the chat, so I'm gonna leave it be for the moment. Oh, but I'm getting another message from YouTube. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it for a minute. Okay. So we're about to get some dissenting opinions about Zack Snyder, and that's okay, because he's gonna say, as an objectivist, he thinks Rorschach was a hero, or Rorschach was a hero. He makes Cyborg even more unlikable, and Flash is a freaking cringe factory. So here's the thing. I'm gonna go through those one by one. One, Zack Snyder is an objectivist. I'm not a fan of that either, and I'm not gonna defend that. I think that is where. Oh, what the hell! Stupid camera went completely out of focus when I turned that light on. I think Zack Snyder did misunderstand the Watchmen for that reason, and did fundamentally not really, like, make all these little mistakes along the way that kind of are like, oh, did you get the graphic novel? Because little, like, the best example of that is actually, to me, the difference between the Rorschach's death scene and, okay, we don't need to get into all this, in the movie versus in the book. In the book, it's like silent and quiet. In the movie, it's like Night Owl screaming like, no! And that's kind of the difference between Snyder and like the comics or something like that. Snyder has no subtlety, and all of his objectivist crap is just background nonsense, but it makes him a terrible director for Superman. As for Cyborg, he is wooden and he starts out that way, but I actually do like it because that's his character arc, is basically finding his humanity again. And by the end, he's like joking around a little bit with Aquaman, and gradually he's becoming more and more of a person. It actually was kind of present in the theatrical version too, but done so much better in Snyder Cut. And yes, while I don't love Snyder's darky dark world or anything like that, And I don't really like Snyder's humor as it applies to The Flash, which Nick is kind of right to criticize him for. This wasn't a miserable experience. And there's a difference between something that's like grim, dark, and miserable, edgelord nonsense, and something that's dark, but still enjoyable. And I think more often than not, Snyder did walk that line much better than he did, like much better in Justice League than he did in Man of Steel or Batman v Superman. And maybe that's why it impressed me. But, yeah, I'm not, there is a debate there. Okay, Mikhail says, in the Snyder Cut, she still mentions Steve. It's fine, it's just so silly. It actually bothered me less in the theatrical version, but now that we've seen Wonder Woman 1984 and we know she's been this obsessed for this long, it's like, oh my god, she just won't let him go. That lady's like almost 100 years out from having known him. No, more than 100 years out at this point, and just can't let go of that one dude, the first man she ever met. What's wrong with her? Nick Colin says he likes the visuals of comics but refuses to take the writing seriously. Well, that's a good point, and there is definitely that ego there where Snyder kind of thinks he can just kind of take comic book movies, and because he's Zack Snyder and he's better than all these other comic book writers and artists, he'll just do a better job without really having to think about it much, is the attitude he seems to take. And that is a problem. Because you get into stuff like Death of Superman, and it's like, well, no, you didn't handle that better. In fact, you handled it much, much worse. I got an issue. Yeah, okay. So I think my mic's sounding good now, which is good. Mikhail says, while the MCU had average movies in the beginning, they were never polarizing like Snyder's. A fair point, and an interesting one. Because you're right. The MCU ones have always been crowd pleasers. The only thing about it is sometimes polarizing is good. Sometimes polarizing means you're kind of doing interesting things and going in different directions and that sort of thing. So, and maybe that says a lot, because like Man of Steel is definitely, I would call polarizing. I'm on the other side of that pole. But that does kind of give it some breadth. I can see from some comments, though, I'm not the only one who doesn't like Man of Steel. Jamieson Horton says, I don't want a faithful adaptation of comics and graphic novels. We've read those stories. I like when writers create new stories or create twists on the classic tales. That is a perfect way of saying how I typically view comic book adaptations. Yeah, either you're gonna create like an old story just with like a little bit of a twist here and there, or you should do something new and different and use the fact that you're doing a movie versus a book, and you are telling a very different kind of story and can do things a book can't, just like a book can do things you can't. That's actually something I think Zack Snyder did understand when making the Watchmen movie. He took advantage of the fact that there's stuff that the comic couldn't do and did it in the films, and that was great. When he does stuff like that, actually Watchmen as a movie really works. Mikhail says, I recently watched this theatrical cut and I appreciated that Superman actually talked to the League. He was mute in the Snyder Cut. Say much to any of them, and that is kind of weird. But I think it's also just because Superman really, truly isn't a huge part of this Justice League movie, and at least that gives some consequences and weight to Superman's death in Batman v Superman. So I'll give him that. Tevia says, heck, if you want grim, dark, and edgy, read New 52, Last Garbage by Teen Titans. Ooh, interesting. We disagree on that. Almost completely. I like those. But there's New 52 is a good example of where there are grim, dark stuff, like what I'm talking about. Shadowcatcher says, because of Sucker Punch and 300, I recently expected more better in the DC movies he directed. Instead, he used DC characters to tell his story instead of telling a DC story with the characters provided. Huh. Well, I don't know. That's just an interesting thought. Like, obviously, I've kind of voiced my own opinion there, but I think Shadowcatcher kind of has a good point there about what he's saying, because it is very much a Zack Snyder story with, like, DC characters overlaid it, and that is weird. And that's where, like, Batman's role in all of this comes across as a little bizarre. Tevia says, Snyder is more egocentric, which is a problem. Yes, I agree with you absolutely. But he continues on saying, oh, let's make some good movies like 300 and Justice League and Watchmen were good. Yeah, and I think Snyder is a lot better with visuals than with story. He's kind of like J.J. Abrams like that, and I would actually prefer Snyder not to be involved with the story and to have less control over that stuff, and to be more of just focusing on the visuals, because he's very, very good. Superman does actually look awesome, especially if you go to the Ultimate Edition, and it has some really cool shots, like cinematography, from a cinematographer perspective and stuff, and I really enjoyed that. Tevia says Last Jedi was also polarizing as well to a lot of Star Wars fans, kind of The Last of Us too. Those are good examples of where polarizing fiction, I think, can be in a more positive light. Yes, Last Jedi is controversial, but it's not the piece of crap that Rise of Skywalker was. And even if you don't like it, I think you can kind of recognize that it was going for something, even if not everyone is going to be with it. What was that other example you gave? Last of Us 2. Again, polarizing, but I think because it's really different than the first game and really doing some pretty hefty stuff. And also, in both cases of those and this Justice League Snyder Cut, full of legitimate criticisms. And I think all of that, because there's all sorts of stuff you can fairly criticize Last Jedi for. Because as much as I kind of like Last Jedi, then I think about like the casino scene or like the guy with a butt and all the weird, absurd, out of place comedy in Last Jedi. And so these movies have stuff that people can grasp onto and be like, well, what about this terrible thing that happened that everyone hates? And it's like, well, you kind of have to. That polarizing stuff isn't necessarily bad like that, but I think that's just a common feature of it too, is it will have issues with it usually, which isn't a problem, not a bad thing. It's more of indicative that it's kind of pushing the boundaries and trying something different and not going by a blueprint of a superhero movie that's been done 100 times before. Because, yeah, I'll give Snyder so much credit for not just carbon copying any of the Avengers movies and turning it into a Justice League movie. That's pretty much what Joss Whedon did with the Justice League movie, and it sucked. Youssef was talking about John Kent dying in a tornado in reference to Man of Steel. That's like one of many problems I have with Man of Steel, but we don't need to revisit that. Like I said, everyone's got their own opinion on that. I certainly can see the value of Man of Steel, and to be honest, I was appreciating the Man of Steel quite a bit during the Snyder Cut when that music would crop up once in a while with Superman in a very effective way. So it's not all bad. And it's not like it's a garbage movie. Nick Colin says, also I had an afternoon with Neil Gaiman years ago, and he had some funny takes on the Watchmen film. Oh, I bet. That would be such an interesting conversation. I can only imagine what that dude had to say about that movie. That's really funny. Because, oh man. Because, like, I can recognize there's problems with Snyder. Oh, and I was talking about it earlier and stuff, so I wouldn't need to go there again. But that's so funny. Tevia says, John Kent's Superman's father dying in a tornado, I do agree, was kind of stupid. And then I think they're talking about Smallville now because he died of a heart attack. But you know what? That was handled much better than Man of Steel. And that was just Smallville, a TV show from like 2 decades ago now. And I remember Pa Kent's death in that show, and it was very moving. In comparison, I thought really well done. What else we got in chat here? Grim John, who was saying he really liked Man of Steel, says John Kent's death was dumb. I'll concede that. Well, and that's the thing, though, about polarizing movies like this, is you can have dumb stuff in them. Like, there's a lot more of dumb stuff in Last Jedi than the few I went over, because it's doing different things and stuff. I will never love The Last Jedi or even really like it all that much. But there's always going to be part of me that loves it a little bit just because it gets into how I kind of view the Force and how I would write for Star Wars and stuff, which is really blurring the lines between Sith and Jedi and being like this black and childhood fairy tale nonsense. And I think that was really interesting. I just don't think that kind of movie pairs well with like your mama jokes. Shadowcatcher says, then again, I'm just a lowly hunter that has read comics nearly my entire life. What do I know about making movies? That's, that could be said of all of us in chat, and it's just interesting that there's little things like that none of us would ever do, and that are mistakes that Zack Snyder has made like 3 times over again. Like, just things like the Man of Steel like nightmare massacre scenes and stuff like that. I would never in a million years not have like a happy Superman movie or like even if you're doing a darker Superman story, you need some levity in there. It was just really strange and also very derivative of Chris Nolan. But I don't want to make Grim John feel bad for liking that movie. It's not that bad or anything like that. Nick Colin says, I think Snyder has a great eye, but they're making it look good. That's true. He would be a great director of photography. Also true. But needs someone else to work with actors and design the flow of a story. Damn. Nick Colin came in swinging for Snyder and is providing a hefty criticism. But he's also saying a lot of very true things that I can't really disagree with. Grim John says, I definitely liked Last Jedi more than Death Star 3 or The Rise of Garbage. Oh, God, yeah. I think we're all with you there. I think even some of the biggest critics of Last Jedi are probably going to agree with you there because I hate Rise of Skywalker so much. Tevia says it was a complete train wreck. Okay, we're getting off. Oh, but she also brings up Richard Donner had Superman Pa Kent having him die in a heart attack in the movie as well. I didn't know that, which was also moving. I guess I forgot is what I'm trying to say. I like those older Superman movies. It just feels relevant to this stuff. And honestly, this is as close as Zack Snyder's Superman's ever gotten to that Richard Donner era, like Christopher Reeve Superman. And he didn't do a bad job of it. For all of his objectivist nonsense that makes him kind of have bad instincts around Superman, I thought he kind of got Superman right for at least one key part, and really liked it. Nicole says, I couldn't agree with you more about Superman and him being the character Snyder seems to struggle with the most. Well, to be fair, though, I'm not the first person to have said that, and people really specific stuff that you, Nick, were talking about. I lost my... like the character and the philosophy, that's the word I'm looking for, behind Superman and stuff. There's a contrast there that it doesn't... And you can take a character like Cyborg that is in theory supposed to be more lighthearted and fun, and, let Zack Snyder do his thing. And it's not as big a deal because it kind of works for a character like Cyborg, even if that's not traditionally how he's used. And what I liked most about that is he's so cybernetic that it's like, oh, he's almost completely taken over my machine. And it's almost like the humans coming to life over the course of the movie. I thought that was handled decently. Tevia says, blurring the lines between good and evil in Star Wars was an interesting concept. It's just a shame the concept was dropped in Rise of Skywalker, which was damage control. And then Grim John's, that's good. And, you should be secure in your feelings and joy and love for a movie. Like, man, I got worried is just you were walking it back a little bit, and sometimes people do feel almost attacked when there's dissent in a movie opinion, and I don't really think there should be. If you unmitigatedly love the Snyder Cut and disagree with some of the criticisms that I and many other people in chat today have voiced, that's okay too. There's not like an impetus that we all have to agree on these things, and I think it's worth pointing out, like, oh, well, it's polarizing, and there's reasons people are gonna like it or dislike it, and acknowledge that, because the most fun is having like an hour and a half long conversation and talking about that. Mikhail says, why did Snyder think that having Darkseid being defeated before he even meets the heroes was a good idea? Well, I didn't take it that way, though. I took it as more of like a Thanos-style setup. I don't think it diminished the movie at all. I thought it was cool that Steppenwolf got his ass beat, and then Darkseid's like, all right, we're just going to take the whole army and bring it to Earth. That, to me, felt like a shift upwards. However, it's exhausting that we're going to have to deal with parademons again, because that's already like a boring villain or like enemy to just have your heroes fighting en masse or anything like that. And this movie didn't do too much of that, but we just can't keep doing that every time Darkseid shows up or whatever. Tevia says, that made me so happy to see Superman actually smile to Alfred, it made him so, like, Tevia so happy. To me it was, and we'll do it now that we're kind of near the end, but spoilers for one of my favorite moments for the whole thing. Steppenwolf swinging that axe at Cyborg, and Superman zips in, and the axe hits him like it's nothing, and Superman just looks up to him, and the music swells, and he just goes, like, not him. Blows a little bit of frost breath on the axe and shatters it. And all of a sudden, the dude that's been wailing on the Justice League the entire movie is done. And Superman just beats the crap out of him. I actually loved that. I thought that was so that's what reminded me of the Christopher Reeve Superman, and Henry Cavill is good in that role. I really wish we got more of that. But it kind of like that is like if Zack Snyder can do that for Superman more, then he can direct Superman, and he needs to just do more of that. Like understand what works in that scene and just expand that and build a movie out of it, kind of thing. Nick says the Donner death was so good in teaching Clark that no matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to save everyone, and there are some things he can't. Yeah. I really like those older ones, and then it all falls apart by the time we get to like Superman 4. But whatever. Tevye says technically Steppenwolf was defeated, not Darkseid. Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. And then Tevye says I didn't take Darkseid being defeated either. Mikhail says in the Snyder Cut it was Darkseid. No, Darkseid watched them through a portal, but that's what I liked, is that they beat the crap out of Steppenwolf, and then Darkseid's just like, all right, close the portal. We're gonna like just I'll have to do this myself, kind of thing. And I appreciated that. Holy crap. Grimjohn, thank you for joining our Gamma tier membership. Enjoy the little thumbnails. That's awesome. Well, I hope you enjoy that. You get exclusive access to our streams, any other bonus content we have. I do have something kind of fun I might try out for membership, but I really do appreciate that. That's awesome, and thank you so much. Right now we just have mostly some behind the scenes footage up, but there'll be more as time goes on. But that's kind of like the sort of thing I kind of view the membership thing being, but that's really great. Thank you, sir. You really are the original gangster. Yeah, Mikhail says in the Snyder Cut it was Darkseid that got defeated, but yeah, I think you're kind of misreading things a little bit. Nick says, I fully agree that Snyder's Cut is way better than the cinematic cut. Still didn't like it, just want so much more from my favorite comic book universe. Well, I'm giving voice to the people who really liked it when responding to your stuff, but I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I definitely recognize that the Snyder Cut isn't perfect. I just am with people when they're saying, oh, it's better than Justice League. It's like, are you kidding? It's like night and day to the Justice League theatrical movie. It is so much better than that. That's the difference that really strikes me. Tevye says, I agree Henry Cavill is a good Superman, and this cut gave us a Superman full of hope. Well, I'm glad. I'm with you. That's a good way of putting it. Hope. Like, it really did. The other thing, too, is we spent so much time building up to there's no Superman, he's gone, and then all the work that they put into resurrecting him, and then he's still just not around for the final battle. And then when he finally shows up, that felt pretty earned to me. Although someone else is saying in chat it basically wasn't. Mikhail says, I'm talking about the ancient history flashback where we actually see Darkseid pass out. Oh yeah, and you know what? When I saw that, I thought that too, and that is weird. And you know what? Damn, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. This is a bloated, super long 4-hour thing. You are right, that is a flaw, because we saw not only Darkseid get defeated, almost killed, and he doesn't say a word either, which I found kind of weird and out of place. And it's like, okay, they're saving his talking for later, but that felt odd. I wish that was Steppenwolf or something like that, but maybe that would have undermined Steppenwolf in this movie. So maybe it should have just been a different new god enemy. There's a lot of them, like Blast. Oh no, I'm thinking, what's his name? The guy with the long beard and the long hair. Anyways, there's so much they could have done, and maybe navigated that a little bit better. Yeah, okay, Mikhail, Tevye and I owe you an apology, because you're correct, and that is a huge flaw. Because it's weird seeing all these people in the ancient past defeat Darkseid, and so we know it's doable, and that he can be knocked back, and that he failed once on Earth before. And he hasn't even been an enemy of the Justice League yet. Oh no, why would they do that? Oh boy. That's so funny. I didn't even think about that. Tevye says, Desaad saying Steppenwolf would fail and Darkseid saying Antilife is found. Desaad said, we'll do this the old way. It was awesome. That was a good scene. And you get to see Granny Goodness, which was so cool to me. Grim John, our newest member, says, I'm really enjoying this open, like this chat. Can't wait for the Suicide Squad chat. Oh yeah, I hope you, this open dialogue is what he's saying. And can't wait for the Suicide Squad chat. Yes, I that'll be fun, and I'll make sure to do that because a lot of people seem excited for that. That being said, we might do Winter Soldier and Falcon in between those two, right? Just give Marvel a chance to breathe in somewhere in here. Um, Although you guys are gonna probably be asking me a lot about that, so maybe I'll reconsider that. Tevia says we got Steppenwolf invading the Earth in the theatrical cut. I remember, yeah, and I don't know if that's better though, because then you just are seeing Steppenwolf get defeated before the Justice League takes him on in the same movie. So I would say just pick a new like character from Apocalypse, like one of the Furies or something. Just a cameo. It's just a cameo, anyways, right? Yeah, and that's actually exactly what Nick Olin says right there in chat. You could be one of the female Furies. Barda would have been so cool. Could you? Oh my god, that would have been so awesome if it's just Apocalypse forces in the ancient past, and all the comic book fans know who it is, and there's just no acknowledgement beyond that of who that is. And it's just like, oh, that's what I was saying. Like DC kind of can do that fan service better. That would have been awesome. Oh well. Mikhail says maybe it's just me, but I prefer it when the villains seem unbeatable. Oh no no no, you are totally right about that. I just because the movie's so big, I kind of forgot that happened. But that does make Darkseid seem a little weaker because we know well, not a little weaker, a lot weaker, because we know he can be defeated because he got defeated by like Hippolyta and that whoever was carrying around the Shazam powers at the time, and a Green Lantern with that cameo. Yusef says Steppenwolf's mother. Oh yeah, like because there are a lot of those choices, right? Granny Goodness would have been fun too. And then she gets knocked back, and it's like, why is there an old lady leading this invasion force? But the comic book fans would know. Grim John says I'm ready to talk about Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So okay, so we got some options then. I do usually like to alternate, but Calabac, that's who I was thinking of. Thank you guys. Tyson Mims was saying Calabac would have made sense. That's who I was thinking. Nick Colin says Barda would have been amazing. It would have been so cool. Tevia says Steppenwolf saying mother in the theatrical cut was weird. Yeah, it's just a reference to the mother boxes. Mikhail says Darkseid forgetting about Earth and the anti-life equation was weird too. Yeah, I assume either all of those like Amazons and Atlanteans were able to kind of magically conceal Earth from Darkseid's like knowledge or like ability to find, or the injury just like so it must have been that, or the mother boxes just teleport them there and they don't really know where the planets are, which is weird. That's you know what that is? That's a plot hole, but one that didn't really bother me at the time of watching the movie. Tevia says maybe it was because he didn't have the Omega Force. Oh, yeah, I guess he didn't. Yusa says, sorry. Tevia says also Darkseid was defeated by Zeus. Oh, Zeus. Is that who that's supposed to be? I thought it was like the Shazam lightning. That would have been cooler if true. You know what it should also have done? Is have Black Adam just show up in the flashback. Oh, also, random part that really bothered me. Martian Manhunter shows up for a couple of scenes in this movie. Why isn't he helping against Darkseid? What's he so busy doing that he can't join the Justice League and help them? That was bizarre to me. Tevye says Ares helped as well. I saw that. I saw some of the old gods and stuff, and that was really cool. And I recognized, oh yeah, Zeus and Ares were there, but I think there was also powers, unless I'm mistaken. Or maybe I am thinking that was just supposed to be cool as hell. Tevye is saying maybe Darkseid didn't know the anti-life equation was there on Earth, and then Mikhail says he knew. Yeah, I think that's the idea. Is they were coming to Earth in the ancient past to try and get it. They knocked Darkseid out, and he like fled. And then they've just been looking for world after world for the anti-life equation before they finally confirmed it was on Earth. But then, if that were true, you'd think that the Amazonians being on Earth would have been a dead giveaway to Steppenwolf. So, I don't... This gets into the stuff of... Zack Snyder maybe not being the best writer in the world compared to how he is with stuff visually. Because it doesn't... Now that we're talking about it, it doesn't really feel that thought through, and I don't actually have an answer to any of this. Like, it's just clearly a plot hole. Grimjohn says, for Nick is jumping in about Martian Manhunter, saying, like, yes, agreeing with me. But Grimjohn does say, I don't think Martian Manhunter was in the know, but it kind of feels like he is, because he was, like, pulling Lois Lane into the events, and he's telepathic, and then he even kind of has, like, that encounter with Brute to help you, and then he's like, well, we could use your help. Like, I just thought that was like a little cameo without maybe all that thought through. Tevye says also Artemis got on the hunt. That whole flashback scene was just full of little awesome bits and pieces like that, and I really do like all the appearances. It was just like such a cool bit to do for like that flashback. Nick Colin says Martian Manhunter used to be the heart of the Justice League. I mean, he was the chairman at various points, and deserves to be so much more than being the guy who stood out of the fight. See, Eustace also saying he's weak to fire, but I don't know if that matters. There wasn't that much fire around. He'd have to sit out every fight if we ever were always worrying about potential fire. Unless it's like something specific about Chernobyl where it's like, oh no, that radiation is no good for me. Like, and that would work. Nick Colin says he was the general who talked to Soups in Man of Steel. Oh, okay. Because I did see him turn into the general when he's talking to Lois Lane, but I did not put that connection together. Thank you. And Tevye was saying he loved that cameo. It's fine. It just was weird to me. It was something I was thinking about when he turned up again at the end of the movie. And I was like, what the hell? Like, why were you? Where were you? Mikhail says, Mother Boxes were so scared of Superman for whatever reason didn't activate in the thousands of years before he was even born. Yeah. That doesn't make a lot of sense at all, does it? And I don't know why the new gods knew that Kryptonians would be super strong on that Earth at all. Or that, like, Kryptonians are a whole thing to the rest of the universe at this point. Like, would they know that? It's very strange. Unless the Mother Box is activated in response to all the Lex Luthor's shenanigans with, like, Doomsday. Mikhail says, movie is entertaining, but you can nitpick it forever. Oh, I don't doubt that. I'm sure there's so much more than anything, like, even that we've covered here. But, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a nice long stream, but I knew it was going to be a long chat about this. Thank you so much for Grim John for joining, Harry Brown for donating, like, $15 Canadian, according to my little thing over there, and everyone else for chatting and contributing and just sharing their thoughts on the Snyder Cut. Again, if you haven't seen it, I would recommend it just for the experience. Don't watch it all necessarily in one sitting. I didn't, and I think that improved my opinion. But it's just to see the difference between the theatrical version and the Snyder Cut. It is so cool. Like, as someone who edits videos all the time, I was fascinated by that so much. Thank you again, guys. You all have a great night too, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island.